On a bright spring morning in 1938, the hills of McKean County, Pennsylvania, were dotted with blooming flowers and the sound of birdsong. It was May 8th, Mother's Day. The West family, like many others that day, had chosen to spend time together in nature, celebrating the occasion with a peaceful picnic in the remote wilderness of the Allegheny National Forest. It was a kind of day that etched itself into memory for its quiet beauty. But for the West, this day would be remembered for a far more haunting reason: the day their little girl vanished without a trace. Marjorie West was just 4 years old at the time, a sweet, curious child with curly red hair and big, trusting eyes. She lived with her parents, Shirley and Cecilia West, in the town of Bradford, Pennsylvania. Marjorie's older siblings, Dorothea, age 11, and Alan, age 7, adored her. The West family was a loving and close-knit unit. Shirley was a successful oil executive, and their lives were comfortable. There was nothing unusual about the morning they set out for their Sunday picnic. In fact, it was picture perfect. They had attended church earlier that morning, and then packed their belongings for a simple outing to a familiar area in the mountains. The picnic spot they chose was in a place known as White Gravel, just a short drive from their home. It was a scenic area where local families often visited. As they laid out their picnic and relaxed, the children began to explore the nearby meadows. Marjorie and Dorothea wandered a bit from the adults, picking wildflowers in the tall grass that surrounded a nearby outcropping of rocks. Dorothea later recalled that the two of them were laughing and chatting while gathering purple violets, Marjorie's favorite. It was a kind of innocent moment that makes up the quiet joys of childhood. At one point, Dorothea remembered she had something to tell their mother and turned back toward the picnic area, leaving Marjorie only briefly. It was a matter of a minute or two, but when Dorothea returned, Marjorie was gone. Completely gone. No sound, no sign of struggle, no footprints in the dirt. Just a crushed bouquet of violets lying near a large rock, a rock their mother had specifically warned them to stay away from due to the possibility of rattlesnakes. The panic set in almost instantly. At first, they called her name. Then they searched the surrounding area, thinking maybe Marjorie had wandered off, chasing a butterfly or picking more flowers. But the terrain was rugged and open, and there was no place for a child to hide. Within the hour, the search expanded. The West family contacted authorities, and by evening, over 100 people were scouring the forest. What began as a family picnic was quickly turning into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. In the days that followed, the search became one of the largest in Pennsylvania's history at the time. Over 3,000 people joined in, including police, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and even soldiers from the National Guard. Dogs were brought in to track her scent, and airplanes flew overhead searching for any signs of movement. The community rallied, forming search lines and checking every nook and cranny of the surrounding wilderness. People combed through the tall grass, ravines, caves, and even abandoned oil wells that dotted the area. Despite their efforts, no trace of Marjorie was found. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. The story quickly spread beyond Pennsylvania. Newspapers across the country carried headlines about the missing child, and radio broadcasts shared the West family's plea for help. People were heartbroken by the image of a happy little girl suddenly vanishing in broad daylight. The idea that a child could simply disappear while under the watch of her own family, in a matter of seconds, sent chills through communities everywhere. There was no ransom note, no signs of a struggle, no clue as to what had happened. It was a pure mystery, one that defied explanation. Some volunteers who were part of the original search later described how eerie the atmosphere became. The beauty of the forest, once comforting, now felt sinister. Every tree seemed to hide a secret. Every shadow hinted at a horror no one could put into words. As hours turned into days and then into weeks, hope began to fade. Investigators began to consider every possibility: accident, animal attack, or even abduction. But none of the evidence pointed clearly in any direction. The West family was devastated. Cecilia West, Marjorie's mother, refused to give up hope. She held on to the belief that her daughter was alive somewhere, that perhaps someone had taken her and was raising her in secret. The idea may have seemed far-fetched, but when faced with a void so complete, Even the most unlikely hope becomes a lifeline. Shirley West, a man of means, offers substantial reward for any information, but nothing substantial ever came forward. There were sightings, of course. Over the next few months and even years, reports came in from surrounding areas of people claiming to have seen a child matching Marjorie's description. But none of these leads ever led to anything concrete. They were dead ends. Cruel tricks played by fate on a family already suffering. And then there was the matter of the mysterious car. On the day of the picnic, 3 cars were spotted in the vicinity. 2 were later accounted for and dismissed. But the third, a light-colored Plymouth sedan, was never identified. Witnesses described seeing it parked on a gravel road and then speeding away shortly after the time Marjorie vanished. Investigators pursued every available lead, but the car and its driver were never found. It was a detail that would haunt the case for decades. As time moved on, the story of Marjorie West slowly faded from public memory, but it never disappeared entirely. For the people of Bradford, it became part of the town's legacy, a sorrowful tale passed down through generations. And for the West family, it was an open wound that never truly healed. The days after Marjorie West's disappearance were filled with confusion, desperation, and heartbreak. For a while, it seemed like the entire state of Pennsylvania had stopped to look for this little girl. From the air and on foot, volunteers, police, and even local hunters searched every inch of land in and around the picnic area. They covered hills, ravines, streams, and thick forest, some parts so wild and rocky that the searchers had to crawl through thorn bushes and slippery slopes just to check. But even with all that effort, not a single clue was found. No torn clothing, no footprints, no sound. It was as if Marjorie had vanished into thin air. One of the strangest things about this case was how quickly she disappeared. Dorothea, Marjorie's sister, said she was only gone for a minute, maybe 2 at the most. She had just gone to speak to their mother, and when she turned around, Marjorie was no longer where she had left her. The little bunch of purple flowers Marjorie had picked were still there, lying near a rock. But Marjorie herself was nowhere in sight. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. It was impossible to believe that a child could just vanish like that in broad daylight, without making a sound or leaving a single trace. Despite how big the search was, authorities started to run out of leads. They checked nearby wells, old mines, caves, and even drained a few ponds, but they found nothing. They considered whether an animal could have taken her, but that theory didn't hold up. There would have been signs, blood, torn clothing, tracks. There was nothing like that. Some people believe she may have fallen into an abandoned oil well, but even those were inspected thoroughly. The search dogs had picked up Marjorie's scent, but it didn't lead deep into the woods. Strangely, it led toward the main road, and then the scent suddenly stopped. That's when investigators started to wonder. What if Marjorie had been taken by someone in a car? Witnesses said a light-colored Plymouth sedan was seen parked nearby around the time she vanished. It was the only car that hadn't been identified later. Some people said it left the area quickly, almost as if the driver was in a hurry. Could someone have grabbed Marjorie and driven off before anyone realized what happened? It seemed impossible, but at the same time, it was the only theory that made sense. Nothing else explained the total lack of clues. The FBI got involved in the case, and agents interviewed people across the region. They followed dozens of tips, checked out strangers, and even looked into local workers and travelers. But nothing led anywhere. Every time they thought they had a new lead, it ended in disappointment. No suspect, no ransom demand, and no confirmed sightings. It was a dead-end mystery. The West family kept hoping. They printed posters, talked to reporters, and worked with police. They even brought in private investigators. Shirley West believed that Marjorie might still be alive. Cecilia, her mother, never gave up either. They clung to the idea that someone had taken her, but was raising her as their own child, maybe in another state, maybe under a different name. Over the years, there were a few strange reports that gave the family and police new hope. One woman said she had seen a girl who looked like Marjorie at a roadside gas station in another town. Another claimed a couple with a child matching her description had rented a cabin nearby just days after the disappearance. But none of those stories could be confirmed. Either the people were never found again, or the information was too vague to follow. Still, the family kept hoping. They believed someone, somewhere, might recognize her photo or remember something strange from that day. One theory that became popular years later was the idea that Marjorie might have grown up not knowing she had ever been taken, that she may have lived a full life under a different name, believing the people who raised her were her real parents. It sounds like something from a movie, but in real life, it's possible. If someone had taken her when she was so young, she wouldn't remember much. If they never told her the truth, she could go her entire life not knowing she was once the center of a massive missing person case. In 2009, decades after the original case went cold, a Pennsylvania author named Harold Thomas Beck became deeply interested in Marjorie's story. He had grown up hearing about her disappearance and wanted to learn more. After researching the case for years, he came across a woman in another state, someone who he believed might actually be Marjorie West. She had red hair, was about the same age Marjorie would be, and her birth records were unclear. Even stranger, the woman had once admitted to a friend that she believed she had been adopted, but didn't know any details about her early childhood. When Beck looked closer, he saw even more similarities. The woman had a small scar near her eye, just like Marjorie had as a child. Could it really be her? Beck didn't want to make the woman's name public, and he didn't want to pressure her, but he told her about his research, and at first, she didn't seem very interested. She didn't want to talk much about her past. Over time, she began to warm up a little, but she never fully accepted or rejected the idea that she might be Marjorie West. Beck offered to do a DNA test to compare her to living members of the West family, but she said she needed time to think about it. As far as the public knows, the test was never done. Years have passed since then. The woman never came forward, and the case remains unsolved. No one has been charged. No body has ever been found. There's no physical evidence of what happened that day. Just theories, memories, and a deep, painful mystery that refuses to fade. But something about Marjorie's story keeps people coming back. Maybe it's the setting, the peaceful forest that turned into the scene of a tragedy. Maybe it's the heartbreak of a family who lost a child without a trace. Or maybe it's a tiny hope that she might still be out there somewhere, alive, never knowing who she really was. That hope may be slim, but it's enough to keep the story alive even today. Years passed, and still no answers came. The search faded, the headline stopped, and life moved on. But for the West family, the pain never truly ended. Marjorie's parents, Cecilia and Shirley, held on to hope for as long as they could. Her father passed away in the 1960s, never knowing what happened to his little girl. Her mother lived into her 90s, and even in her later years, she still believed that Marjorie might one day walk through the door. The heartbreak of not knowing was something they carried forever. For Dorothea, Marjorie's older sister, the memory of that day never faded. She always remembered turning back and finding her little sister gone. That one moment changed the rest of her life. In later interviews, Dorothea said she believed Marjorie had been taken, abducted by someone who saw an opportunity and acted fast. It haunted her, not just because of the loss, but because it happened so quickly, so quietly, and without any warning. She lived her whole life wondering what became of her sister. What's most haunting about this mystery is how perfectly ordinary everything seemed just before it happened. It was a quiet Sunday picnic in the countryside, a peaceful moment between sisters, picking wildflowers in the warm sun. No sign of danger, no reason for fear. And then suddenly, gone. No struggle, no sound, no clues. Just an empty space where a child had been only seconds earlier. That's the part that makes this case so deeply unsettling. It reminds us how fragile moments can be, how quickly everything can change. Over time, the case of Marjorie West became one of the most mysterious child disappearances in American history. It has been the subject of books, podcasts, and documentaries. True crime fans, amateur detectives, and internet sleuths have all tried to piece together what might have happened. Some believe she was taken by someone she knew. Others think it was a stranger who just happened to be passing by. A few think she wandered off and fell into a hidden spot that searchers missed. But after more than 85 years, none of those theories have been proven. And then there's a theory that maybe, just maybe, she's still alive, that she was taken and raised under a different name, never knowing she once belonged to another family. The woman found by Harold Thomas Beck in 2009 remains one of the most intriguing possibilities. But without DNA evidence, we may never know for sure. She declined to go public, and the world respected her privacy. Whether or not she was truly Marjorie West is something that might remain unanswered forever. In recent years, modern technology like genetic genealogy and DNA matching has helped solve decades-old cold cases. Children who disappeared in the 1950s or 60s have been identified using family DNA. Long-lost relatives have been reunited. There is still hope that someday someone will take a test and the truth will come out. Maybe a grandchild of Marjorie, or even Marjorie herself, if she's still alive, will appear in a database, and the puzzle will finally be solved. But until then, it remains one of the most chilling and unresolved mysteries in American history. What makes it even more heartbreaking is how ordinary Marjorie was. A red-haired, freckle-faced girl with a big smile and a soft voice. She liked playing outside and picking flowers. She loved being with her family. She wasn't doing anything risky or dangerous. She was just being a kid, and then she was gone. Here is a real photo of Marjorie West, taken shortly before her disappearance. Look closely at that face. The innocence, the joy, the life in her eyes. It's not just a photograph. It's a memory frozen in time. A moment of peace before everything changed. It's a reminder that behind every missing persons case is a real story, a real family, and a real life interrupted. If Marjorie is still alive today, she would be over 90 years old. She may be a grandmother, maybe even a great-grandmother. She might have lived a full life, never knowing the pain left behind in the hills of Pennsylvania. Or maybe she remembers something, a flash of childhood, a strange car, a different home. Maybe somewhere deep down, she wonders where she came from. We may never know the full truth, but as long as her story is told, she isn't forgotten. And that's why stories like this matter. Not just for closure, but for remembrance, for justice, even if it comes late, for families who deserve answers, and for all the other children whose names and faces we might never hear. If you found Marjorie's story moving, disturbing, or thought-provoking, we invite you to keep her memory alive. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, AI Alvantis, where we uncover real-life mysteries, forgotten cases, and stories that deserve to be heard. Every view, every comment, and every share helps bring attention to those who still need answers. Marjorie West vanished on a sunny Sunday afternoon in 1938, but her story still echoes through time, not because of how it ended, but because we still believe somewhere out there the truth is waiting to be found.